Lesson 7.2 is about multiplying fractions and whole numbers, specifically using a model to show what it means to multiply a fraction and a whole number. So the whole purpose of this lesson is not necessarily, well, it is to find the answer to the problem, but more than just finding the answer, you need to be able to model or draw a picture to show what the problem really means. So for example, what does it really mean to multiply 3/4 times 2? And what does it really mean to multiply 4 times 2/3? The biggest thing I want you to think about in this lesson is that this multiplication sign means of or groups of. Think about when you first learned to multiply and you were doing 3 times 5, you learned that 3 times 5 means 3 groups of 5. The same applies when you're multiplying fractions. 3/4 times 2 means you're finding 3/4 of 2. 4 times 2/3 means you're finding 4 groups of 2/3. So think this multiplication sign means of or groups of. All right, so 3 times 3/8. Again, think about this as 3 groups of 3/8. We're going to model this first using a picture up here and then using a number line. So we're going to show this 2 different ways. So 3 groups of 3/8. So right here I have one whole and another whole that I split into 8 equal pieces. So this right here is going to represent one whole split into 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 equal pieces. So each of these little pieces is 1/8. All right, so I'm going to shade in one group of 3/8. I'm going to shade in a second group of 3/8, and I'm going to shade in a third group of 3/8. All right, so what I just did is I just shaded in 3 groups of 3/8. Here's my first group of 3/8, here's my second group of 3/8, and here's my third group of 3/8. So altogether I have one whole and one extra eighth. Right, so 3 groups of 3/8, 3 times 3/8 is 1 and 1/8, and we showed that in our model. So now let's look at this on a number line. So I have a number line down here. I'm going to split each of my wholes into eighths. So we'll do that first. Okay, so between 0 and 1 I should have 8 equal pieces. So this is 1/8, 2/8, 3/8, 4/8, 5/8, 6/8, 7/8, 8/8, and again 1/8, 2/8, 3/8, 4/8, 5/8, 6/8, 7/8, 8/8. Okay, so I just showed eighths on my number line. And again, we're going to show 3 groups of 3/8. So I'm going to start with one group of 3/8, a second group of 3/8, and a third group of 3/8. So here's one group of 3/8, a second group of 3/8, and a third group of 3/8, right? I did 3/8, 3/8, and 3/8, and I ended at 1 and 1/8. Again, we get our answer 1 and 1/8. So 2 ways that you can model 3 groups of 3/8, or 3 times 3/8. All right, so let's look at a second example. 4 times 2/3, or 4 groups of 2/3. So first we're going to show it using a picture and then using a number line. So 4 groups of 2/3. So I'm going to shade in one group of 2/3. I'm going to shade in a second group of 2/3, a third group of 2/3, and a fourth group of 2/3. So I shaded in 4 groups of 2/3. So 2/3, 2/3, 2/3, and 2/3. And I get a total of 1, 2, and 2/3. One whole, another whole, and 2/3. So 4 times 2/3 is equal to 2 and 2/3. So now let's show this on the number line. I'm going to split each of my holes on the number line into thirds because we're working with thirds. And now I'm going to show 4 groups of 2/3. So here's one group of 2/3, right, from 0 to 2/3. Here's another group of 2/3, a third group of 2/3, and a fourth group of 2/3. So 2/3, 2/3, 2/3, 2/3. And again, I end at 2 and 2/3, right? This is 2 and 2/3. So 2 ways to model 4 times 2/3. Our next 2 problems are going to be slightly different because I've put the fraction as the first factor and the whole number as the second factor. So in this problem, we're finding 3/4 of 2, right? 3/4 of 2. So I showed here 2 wholes, and what we're going to do is find 3/4 of this 2 wholes. This is always of. All right, so here's my 2 wholes. What I want to do is find some way to take this whole thing and split it into fourths. So this whole picture here, we're going to split it into 4 equal pieces. So I'm going to take this whole thing and split it into 4 equal pieces. So when I do that, let's see, that means because this right here is 1 whole and this right here is 1 whole, it means each of these smaller parts is a half. Right, so this is a half, this is a half, this is a half, and this is a half. So what I've done so far is I've taken 2 wholes and split it into 4 equal pieces. Now I want to find 3/4 of that whole picture. And so here's my whole picture, and I want to find 3/4 of it. So 3/4 of that whole picture is this right here, right? Here's 1, 2, 3, 4 pieces, and here's 1, 2, 3 of the 4 pieces. So 3/4 of the whole picture. So 3/4 of my 2 wholes is a half plus a half plus a half, or 1 and 1/2. So 3/4 times 2 is 1 and 1/2, and we just showed that in our model. So now let's show it on our number line. Again, we want to take our whole thing, 2, and split it into 4 equal pieces. So I'm going to take the whole thing and split it into 4 equal pieces. So this is a half, right? 0, 1/2, 1, 1.5. All right, so I've just taken the whole thing and split it into 4 equal pieces, right? 1, 2, 3, 4 equal pieces, and I want 3/4 of that. So 3/4 is this area right here. Right, 1, 2, 3 of the 4 pieces, and again, that's 1 and 1/2. So 3/4 of 2 is 1 and 1/2. All right, final example, we're going to find 5/6 of 3. So here's 3 wholes. We want to split it into 6 equal pieces. All right, so here's the whole thing. I'm going to split it into 6 equal pieces. All right, so that means that each of these pieces is again a half. Okay. So I've taken 3 wholes, split it into 6 equal pieces, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and each piece is a half. Now I want to find 5 of those 6 pieces, right? 5/6. So here is 5/6 of our whole. Right? Here's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 out of those 6 pieces. So that's a half plus a half plus a half plus a half plus a half, or 2 and 1/2. So 5/6 times 3, or 5/6 of 3, is 2.5. And we can show that on our number line too. I can take 3 wholes, split it into 6 equal pieces. And so here's 6 equal pieces, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 equal pieces. Let me draw that out. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 equal pieces. And I want 5/6 of that, so 5 of the 6 pieces. So that's this section right here, 5 of the 6 pieces. And That's, again, here's 2 and here's 3. This is 2.5. So 5/6 of 3 is 2.5. And we showed that in our model and on our number line.